Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending the Transboundary Haze Pollution in Southeast Asia Effect and Forest Fire Management in Indonesia webinar. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this webinar. And my name is Adrian Sasongko. I'm RDI's Program Manager. And I'm very happy to be the moderator for today's webinar. I hope everyone is in a healthy condition wherever you are. Although the pandemic has forced us to hold this event virtually, I hope everyone still has the highest enthusiasm to learn together with us through this webinar. I hope we can have a lively and fruitful discussion along the process. It is hoped that through this webinar, there will be lessons learned that we can get for strategic actions to increase the capacity and quality of forest fires disaster risk management in Indonesia. And therefore, the flow of today's webinar will be divided into two main parts. The first part will be a presentation by our keynote speakers and followed by feedback from our discussants. Then a short Q&A session with the audience will also be conducted near the end of our webinar today. I'm also very pleased to welcome our honorable keynote speakers today. The first, we already have Dr. Emmanuel Sekleves from Lancaster University. And we also have Professor Dr. Bambang Heru Saharjo from Faculty of Forestry, Bogor Agricultural University, IPB. And we also have Dr. Helena Binti Muhammad Fakih from Department of International and Strategic Studies, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, University of Malaya. And honorable discussants, we have Dr. Arif Wijaya from World Resource Institute Indonesia, and Dr. Insinyur Lailan Syaufina MSc from Faculty of Forestry, Bogor Agricultural University. Thank you so much for willing to share and have a discussion with us today in this webinar. Before we get started, I would like to remind all attendees to fill the attendance form, which can be accessed in the chat from RDI team. We will share the link on the chat. And I would like also to explain several things to ensure that our webinar today runs smoothly. Maybe from RDI team can share the rules, the English version maybe. So the rules. These are the rules. The first is please log in as guest with your full name, strip, institution, or affiliation. And participants, please fill the attendance list at the below link provided in the chat box and the YouTube live chat. And during the webinar, please turn off the panelist microphone and activate the panelist video if possible. And the fourth is participants are not allowed to turn on the microphone and video during the webinar. We have unactivated the chat room feature in Zoom, so please write down your questions in Padlet through the below link provided in the chat box and YouTube live chat. And the selected questions will be addressed in the Q&A session and discussion session. And then the panelist presentation materials will be available at the link that provided below. And lastly, we record the meeting and save the presentation. So the meeting, the webinar will be recorded, and later we will also share the recording through the YouTube channel. Now it is time for the opening speech from RDI's Executive Director, Dr. Elizabeth Hrianawati. To Bu Elizabeth, time is yours.
Thank you very much, Adrian, and welcome you all to our webinar. RDI is the one who coordinating this webinar, but actually this is a collaborative project under Humane that is coordinated by Dr. Emmanuel Sekalev from Lancaster University. So this is hopefully just a beginning of a further collaboration and communication between the partners in this project. I would like also to take up your time a little bit to introduce a little bit on RDI. So we are a think tank based in Indonesia. And then, yeah, we can go next, please. Okay, this is just some of our research location that we have conducted, as well as our partners of research. Next, please. And we have a seven research cluster in RDI, and for this humane project, it is under disaster and climate resilience. So I myself is very eager to continue with this webinar, especially with the topic, because we, as Ardian has mentioned before, we have our distinguished speaker and also panelists, Professor Bambang, Dr. Varki, and Emmanuel Sekalev, Arif. So yes, please enjoy our webinar and do not hesitate to contact us, any of us, in this webinar, and hopefully there will be a collaboration soon. Thank you, Adrian. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Elizabeth, who acted as director of RDI. For the next session, we will have a Menti quiz session. So I would like to give our little warm-up for us today regarding forest fire. There is no right or wrong answer, so please feel free to answer it according to your opinions or experiences. Okay, if you're ready, please open menti.com in your device's browser and enter the voting code. The voting code is 21393757 as the code. Our committee has also shared the link on the chat box if you would like to join directly through the link. So right now we have 8 answers, and now we have around 40 participants. So maybe we can wait a little bit longer to wait for others to join the Mentimeter quiz. So the first question is, have you ever experienced haze pollution from the impact of forest fire? And majority of our participants answered no. Meanwhile, there are some significant number of participants that answered yes. Okay, maybe to the next question. Do you think that forest fires could directly or indirectly affect climate change? Give us some example. Maybe we can wait for more participants to join. It's only 2 answer right now. We already have some answers, and Some of them are air pollution and also human health, and also flooding. And there is also reducing green coverage, biodiversity loss, drier forest condition, and also water cycle disruption, GHG emissions. Interestingly, also some answer drought, and also economic loss. Maybe we can next to the next question. What do you think is the biggest challenge in forest fire management? Palm oil industry, human settlement, policy. Implementing the policies and also industries, state cooperation, finance, politics, states cooperation, law enforcement. Complicated bureaucracy that is also maybe connected to the law enforcement and also the government points, ecosystem damage, and also the prediction when the fire happens. Also, there is state cooperation. Very interesting answers. Maybe we can go to the next question if there is any. Okay, so that was our Mentimeter session. Okay, thank you for answering the question. And I hope through this small quiz, we can get through some of the ideas about the issues behind the forest fire in Indonesia. And also maybe we can also going to the next session, which is we are going to talk about what is the project of the Humane project, and which is a part of the continuity collaborative research between RDI with Lancaster University and University of Malaya, and also University Kebangsaan Malaysia. And before we continue, we also would like to thank the institutions who supported the implementation of this webinar, especially to World Research Institute Indonesia, where Indonesia, and also Bogor Agricultural University, IPB. Okay, now we will begin the session that everyone has been waiting for. I am very pleased to introduce our first keynote speaker today, Dr. Emmanuel Sekleves. He is the co-director of a Future Cities Research Institute, also a senior lecturer at Lancaster University. His main research interests are in designing and co-designing interactions, experiences, tools, and games that inform and influence behavior change, promote a better society, and facilitate health and well-being. Dr. Emmanuel today will give us a little bit of introduction to the original idea on the Humane project or concept in general. The Humane project itself will look closer at deconcentrate and decentralized forest management in Indonesia, and how, along with the slow onset hazards of climate change, they contribute to inequities in distribution of benefits from forest resources. While listening to Dr. Emmanuel's presentation, participants who would like to ask questions to Dr. Emmanuel can write down the questions on the link that has been provided by our committee on the chat box. Please write to whom your question is directed to, and along with your brief identity. Dr. Emmanuel, you have 50 minutes for your presentation. Time is yours.
Dear Adrian, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thanks again the organizers, RDI, along with the partners, for organizing today's very topical and much needed event. And I'm pleased to be among like-minded colleagues from different parts of the world. So good day to everyone. To talk about something that I believe we all have a stake, looking at ways of addressing transboundary haze pollution in Southeast Asia. And I'm going to talk how in the Humane Project, we propose to do that via community engagement in Indonesia. And I'm going to do that by talking about the 5 W's, the what, the why, the how, the who, and the when. So I'm going to make a start with the what. And I mean, we all know that the concentrated forest management in Indonesia, along with climate change, as mentioned before, and inequitable distribution of benefits from forest resources, has actually led to increasing conflict between communities that depend from forests, but also corporate companies, and sometimes the central and local government. And of course, this conflict is in turn leading to an unprecedented increase in forest fires. And the haze that results from these wildfires is creating regional spillovers as it is transported by strong winds to neighboring countries, such as Singapore and Malaysia, impacting public health, education of cross-border communities, and often causing transnational conflict as well. So I think the most important question is, the why. Why is this happening? There's several reasons. I mean, we know, and it was clear by some of the responses provided by participants in the Mentimeter survey beforehand, that forest fires are mainly induced by humans, by anthropogenic activities. And of course, they're exaggerated by climate change. And of course, this is relating to several actors, several different stakeholders having interest in land and forest fires, either preventing, overcoming, or seeking benefits from them. And more precisely, balancing the rapid urbanization with forest management is a challenge. And it's a challenge we face everywhere in the world, not just in Indonesia. And due to limited availability of space, the trend of clearing forests to make way for cultivatable land has been gaining popularity. And this often leads to an increasing amount of forestry and social conflict, and of course, forest fires due to land preparation from palm oil and timber plantation, not just by companies, but also by small farm holders. And of course, this large-scale deforestation, we know that can alter regional weather, even local climate. And Indonesia, in fact, ranks highest in carbon dioxide emissions from peatland degradation. I'm sure colleagues, when they talk about peatland fires, they're going to mention that. And basically what this means is that this makes forest even drier and therefore more susceptible to fire and more difficult then to extinguishing such fires. Of course, all these lead to environmental, health, educational, and broader economic issues and deprivation for communities that are affected by that. And of course, such social conflict results often in increasing violence and deaths of vulnerable people. As in most cases, children, they tend to bear the brunt of this. They're more fragile and are affected the most as their health is threatened. Actually, it's estimated that around 10 million children are at risk from air pollution as a result of fires. I mean, 10 million is basically the size of Jakarta population. So imagine that. And of course, the learning process is disrupted for long periods due to illness, but also school closures. And in 2019 alone, there have been over 2,500 schools that closed in Indonesia, and another 2,500 schools that closed in Malaysia, impacting children across the region, of course, in terms of their education. So I guess the important thing is, how do we resolve that? What can we do? What is clear is that following the same approaches we've been following before is not necessarily resolving the situation. In fact, the top-down approach that has been adopted seems that it has limited outcomes, although there may be some pockets of success. And in fact, unless we change the way we do things, unless we have a paradigm shift, what we'll be doing is what you see in my slide here, trying to put out a large wildfire with a bucket, is not going to do it. And the 3 points that I would like to make here about, how we can resolve that, and that relates to the Humane Project proposal. Now, first of all, preventing fires and conflict, and as a result, transboundary haze requires, first of all, identifying, what are the key drivers of fragility in order to strengthen the factors of resilience. And this is not limited just to the drivers of conflict, but encompasses several different intersectional risks, such as climate change, economic, social, health, and political systems as well. According to the World Bank Group, prevention is about creating incentives for actors to choose actions that resolve conflict without violence. It is important to identify the forest management conflict drivers and the intersectional risks. However, we know from the literature that systematic evidence of the presence of local conflict, the underlying factors associated with it, and the impact upon communities is limited and understudied. And therefore, this is my first point, we need to discover, first of all, the key drivers from the different stakeholder groups' perspective and across different sectors in order to be able to deal with forest management conflict, but also understand better the impact on different communities. Secondly, the best way to prevent societies from descending into crisis and conflict is to ensure that they're resilient through investment in both inclusive but also sustainable development. Studies by the World Bank Group have actually demonstrated that prevention works and it's cost effective, with many countries having actually successfully managed high-risk conflicts and avoided descending into violence. And building a community's resilience and protecting its natural resources is therefore an important component of community engagement in this context. So what we need is participation of local communities, as this approach will help increase community resilience in order to mitigate forest management conflict. And this is true because perception of environmental risk and mitigation decisions are often affected by how the larger community sees the risks. For instance, other than inducing forest fires, local communities, along with other stakeholders, could actually be involved in mitigating and even preventing them. And therefore, building community resilience is very key. And this is the second point, that there is an urgent need to develop community preventative and resilience measures on forest management conflict and community awareness and preparedness as a result of that. And you might ask, well, how do we do that? Well, in addressing this, what we propose in the Humane Project is a community-based approach around forest management and forest fire conflict and haze, one that combines co-design and community engagement. This community-based approach to conflict resolution will anticipate the human drivers and threats behind potential emerging conflict in such context, therefore informing preventative measures before these conflicts emerge. It is true that differences among people's perceptions and living experiences can often form grounds for conflict to arise and develop. And co-design is a recognized approach to include people in decision-making processes that affect their lives. So rather than just become spectators, actually they can be involved in the process. And a co-design approach to forest management can in fact avoid the emergence of conflicts and mitigate hazards by understanding beforehand the motivations that can result in conflict. Therefore, by taking into account people's perceptions and experiences in the various communities, the different stakeholder groups, such an approach can lead to an inclusive and sustainable forest management policy development, shifting forest management focus and approaches right back to people. And for that, we'll need to involve target stakeholders and communities, not merely as research subjects, but also as co-researchers and being very much involved in the development of interventions, as I mentioned before, of policies as well. The question now is who? And of course, we're dealing with a challenge that, as we've seen before, is quite international because it affects the whole region. And of course, international collaboration can foster and strengthen knowledge exchange and sharing of best practices, thereby promoting positive learning amongst different stakeholders. And neighboring countries can actually become allies when they focus on solving shared challenges. And this is exactly what we proposed in this project, a collaboration between different experts from Indonesia, Malaysia, and the UK, sharing the best practices. And because, of course, we're dealing with a wicked problem, one that, as we said, has challenges in different sectors, what we need is basically expertise from very different fields. And you can see that probably reflecting in the slides here. We've got experts in design research, community engagement, international relations, environmental management, policy development, atmospheric and air pollution. And in fact, some of my colleagues, you've already seen Elizabeth making the opening, and Elena is going to talk later in more detail about some of these aspects. So far, basically, I've presented an approach with three main elements. First of all, we need to understand the intersectional key drivers, and we need to evidence this. Then we need to engage communities in building capacity in terms of their resilience, preparedness, and awareness on forest management. And the way we propose of doing that is through co-design and community engagement. So the natural thing to ask is, when is the best time to do that? And for that, I'm going to use an old Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And I think we're at this stage with this challenge we're facing. We need to act now as soon as possible. And I'm pleased to be talking here to you today because I'm really hoping that we can use today's event as a springboard to enhance the collaboration and really kickstart some of this activity that can make a difference, not only to Indonesia, but also the region, and be used also as an example for forest management to other parts of the world that face similar challenges. So this is it from me. I really want to thank everyone for your attention, and I really look forward, in fact, to meeting people in person when the international flight restrictions end. Thanks again, and I'm going to stop sharing and actually pass the floor back to Adrian.
Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel, for the very insightful presentation. There are several key points that I can catch actually from Dr. Emmanuel's presentation in addressing transboundary haze pollution in Southeast Asia. It's also important to also engage the community and also understanding how the conflict is happening and how the forest fire also impacted the education, economics, and social aspects. But the most important is also understanding how to solve the problem, and not only solving, but also preventing the forest fire and building resilience to the community in order to mitigate the impact of the forest fire. And also, there is a very interesting points on the combination of cooperation and community engagement that could be a promising approach in the forest management in the future. Thank you so much, Dr. Emmanuel, for a very nice presentation from you. And maybe we can going to the next keynote speaker for the next presentation. I am very happy to introduce you to our second keynote speaker today, which is Professor Dr. Bambang Heru Saharjo. He is a professor in the Department of Silviculture, Faculty of Forestry, Bogor Agricultural University, who has extensive knowledge and understanding on the topic of forest fire, and also one of the most well-known experts whose opinion and analysis have been frequently asked by many people when it comes to forestry and forest fires. Professor Bambang's presentation today is titled Peat Fire versus Greenhouse Gas, or GHG, Emission and Reduction. And before we begin, I would like to remind you again that if you have a question while listening to Prof. Bambang presentation, please write it down on the link that has been provided by our community on the chat box. Please write to whom your question is directed to, along with your brief identity. Prof. Bambang, you have 20 minutes for your presentation. The time is yours.
Okay, thank you, moderator. This is my third presentation, because in the morning have international conference and I should spend 2 hours there, mostly talking about the issue on greenhouse gases. And then we are lucky today because million hectares of fire burned in US, in Europe, Greece, Aljazair, Bolivia, Brazil, and I don't remember, million hectares burned already, and all produce greenhouse gases. And then we are lucky today because if there is still fire, but there's still rain everywhere, not only in Sumatra, Kalimantan. So situation to be like that. So I would like to run my own PPT because there is a video there. Because if you use the PDF, you cannot see my my video. So I will use my share screen. This is 20 minutes. Okay. Sorry. I think you can see my presentation, right? So this is my presentation. This video is taken by from the space.com. I would like to see you all why I saw this one, because if your calculation on greenhouse gas, especially from peat, there's still uncertainty. Hopefully, after you saw this one, maybe this is part of the solution. I will start with this one. You see here, the fire started and produced smoke here. See here. I think we can use also in ASEAN or maybe other of the world. I think it's necessary. I think it's better because maybe this way is to reduce the uncertainty, maybe. Yeah? Okay. Okay, now we would like to see how about the pit fire. I'll show you the extreme video because this is not often occurs at the or during the pit fires. It is in Jambi. I don't know why it's not working. So this is the actually this is a video. I don't know, maybe something wrong. The area is burned for about 2,000 hectares in Jambi, but this is extreme pit or fires there that sometimes it's hard to find other places. This is only one example, yeah. So it is okay. I borrowed this video from my college. Yeah? And then last year I went to investigate, yeah, for the places, and finally we recognized about 2,000 hectare burns there. And this one, you see, hopefully there will be no more fire. This produce use of the greenhouse gases. You can see the people around here, they're just watching because they don't know how to do. Because when you calculate the flame temperature here is more than 1,000 degrees of Celsius. So it means that if your water drop here, then soon it will be evaporated. So because you should have the special treatment, yeah, in order to extinguish or suppress this pit, especially pit fire. Okay, and then if the fire, especially on pit that is working on the ground and nobody's care, they don't care because the fire will continue even at night. This is only one example. Yeah. Okay, and then the other products will be the smoke. This is we can see here we use from Woodview, NASA. We're working with NASA because we have research collaboration with several universities at US, led by Professor Mark Cohen at the University of Maryland. Yeah. So this is only an example how we monitor the performance of this smoke here. Yeah, because it will go there, or maybe also come here. So I think this is also a good idea. In my center, since 2017, we established what we call the Regional Fire Management Southeast Asia in collaboration with Max Planck Institute from Germany. So we monitor all this area, especially for the Southeast Asia, not only Indonesia, but also others. So we also have this kind of data. And then, as you know, tropical forests have a pivotal role in buffering the balloon of global environmental change. The forests act as a giant carbon sinks, and well-preserved tropical forests can reduce global emissions by 30%. Unfortunately, tropical conservation efforts have a significant challenge from the occurrence of fires. And then extensive fire have become more frequent and pervasive in tropical forests worldwide. And also, it's been identified that Indonesia is one of the hotspot of the fire activities, where because here we have more than 14 million pit. It will become benefit to the country, or maybe it become something, yeah, because if you not well managed, then will problems. And then we know also that fire is a significant source of gas, yeah, and then produce a large amount of small, for example, RPM 2.5 ppm, etc. And the problem of forest fire cannot be observed merely from a single viewpoint. It must be expansively in various contexts. When you dealing with smokes there, like you saw from my video, you will look a link with the accumulation of the greenhouse gases, and then it will impact to the people around, and also many like maybe like the previous said, the school stop, close, or maybe the transportation. I have experience when I would like to go to Spain in 2015 or something. I was still in the ground for investigation. We are lucky because I still get the flight to go to Jakarta. Otherwise, then I cannot go to Spain for the entrance conference. So this has become important. But the other person, like Purnomo, published in 2021, this is not Harry Purnomo from Sipor, but the other Purnomo, they said that there is at least three classification of the actors. So the first, maybe, who have to make an impact in forest fire cases, and then the second one, who have a secondary substantial impact. The third actor are those who pose the least influence in the forest fire. This is his research in Kalimantan. Then this is quite interesting. I was in Madrid, Spain, December 2019, when the Vice President Al Gore stated that they be careful in Indonesia because even your fire is about 1.6 million hectares, but your emission is nearly 2.6 million burn in 2015. Why? Because your pit is burned there. I communicate also with Mark Perinton from the camps to discuss about this result. From here you can see how the producing of this emission daily by daily, because the area burn is so wide. So this is such kind of warning that if you do nothing, or if your activity or your working in this ground is not so optimal, then you will lose your pit and burn and produce huge amount of this emission. And this is an example before. This is in 2019, and this is in 2015. Nearly this one. And then after rechecking about the data in Indonesia, that is clear. This is I took only 7 provinces where the pit is dominated. For instance, like you can see here, in South Sumatra is more than 64 times burned between 2018 to 2019. It's very huge. And also in Central Kalimantan and in Jambi, etc. So the fact that this is true, that this is one of the reasons why the increasing of greenhouses is come from pits. This is another. They start from this one, they clear, and finally burn. So sometimes it's very hard to detect, and then sometimes also they collaborate with this one. This is in 2019. I was in Central Kalimantan, when 2 months of these areas is burned. It's about 3,000 hectares. You can see here what you can get. Because you see here, this is woody pit. So everybody should know when you come to the site and finally you will run the activity. You should understand about the situation. It's not because the pit is unique. Do not compare with the mineral soil. This one, for instance, in Indonesia we have regulation that you should have managed your blocking canal, because for instance, like a groundwater level should be less than 40 centimeters, should be more, etc. Because when you manage this pitland, it should be look like at east ecosystem, because this is a wetland, not dry land. This is the case. The other one is when in 2014, it's in 2014, I was in Pompepa, where on the time only is 20,000 hectares. And in 2015, just the same area is increased more than 20,000 hectares. There is also another. This is also on pit. This is in Sago Plantation in Kepulauan Meranti in Siak. It's about more than 2,000 hectares. And I'm also working with the police for investigation, and we are lucky because the company being penalty for this is quite big. In Indonesian money is about 1.07 trillion they should pay for environmental destruction they made. And then the other point is that when we saw the smokes, the question is what kind of gases exist there. So in 2015, with our team that's supported by NASA, we conduct research in Central Kalimantan, then published in 2016 by Stockwell. So from here, we recognize about 90 gases. Yeah, and then also what the smoke is very also dangerous to the human being. You see here, there is furan and also hydrogen cyanide. The other important one is based on this research, finally we recognize that the IPCC emission factor should be revised because those methods make the the emission greenhouse emission in Indonesia is overestimated. From now here we know the CO is overestimated 8%, methane is 55%, and it's 86%, and CO is much 39%. So it means that you cannot use only the model, but you should know the real situation. I think this morning we have a keynote speaker, Professor Mark Ohren. He said that the point is that you should know what is burn, because sometimes the people don't understand is it fire, is peat fire or surface fire on peat. And the other one, when this is what I said before, when you calculate the emissions using IPCC, from here you can see there is 2 point important point. The one is combustion factor, the other one is burn depth. Burn factor, combustion factor is the equation is burns fuels divided to the unburned fuels. So so it's mean the view on the peat maybe not 1%, not 100%, because in 100% it's mean that you are working on the dry land, working on peat. I mean in Praca Cylindrica, you cannot put the one here, because why? Because the IPCC put the combustion factor 1, and also the burn depth. You make some generalization. Later on, this is another one our paper will publish, because we cannot make any generalization, because the pit is not look like the football places, almost flat. No, this is dumb as etc. So this is depth of burns also different, and combustion also different. You can see here combustion factor is 1. So I'm disagree about this one. So everything looks like managed file, but because in reality it's not like this. This is then make uncertainty. And this one, for instance, like this is reference, for instance, like emission factor CO2, CO, and methane. And then you cannot choose the lowest. No. If you working on Sumatra, you should use the Bata on Sumatra. You working on Kalimantan, you should use the Kalimantan. I think this is the best way. And this is see here, the pitch set about 0.41. The other, they have their own side, so you cannot mix it. And then this is I would like to say with you. We are talking about fine pit land. There must be 2 possibilities. There must be around here. This is what we call is surface fire on pit, and then this is the pit fire. This is that we would like to discuss, because if the fire come here, that means that you eat the fire is consume this pit. So the question is how then protect the pit fires. Then we have the regulation, and here, it is clear. Sometimes when you calculation, you cannot identify which one the smokes come from. This is from surface fire on pit or pit fire, because the product is different. Okay, and this use the equipment well. This is we are working. This is Mark Ohren. We have conduct research in Sumatra, also in Kalimantan, and then this is to show that the how important the organic soil will increase the greenhouse gases. and decrease water table also, blah, 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 emission carbon dioxide. And finally, the drain increase the permeability. And then we got also the reason that the rewetting of the soil may reduce greenhouse gases. This is the reason why then we should protect this one. This is the pit and burn and to be like this. So then actually, this is the reason why Indonesian government try to apply regulation to using the canal blocking, etc. Because we cannot return back the original one to be like this because it burned already. And this produce huge of the smoke, emission gas, etc. This is my PhD student. They also monitoring about the impact of this canal, yeah, to the performance of the groundwater level here. And then here, this is one good example. They follow the government regulation. They're lucky because no fire on the site. But the other ones, they don't care, and then fire. And this one, yeah, we saw in the film. They said that we make a blocking canal, but they finally recognized they're lying because if yes, then the situation to be not like this. And the other one, we should also invite the community, not just to blame and taught them not to do this one. No, we should invite them to work together. This, for instance, like community-based fire management, like in West Kalimantan. Yeah, this is big money. Finally, they recognize this is very good for them. This is in Siak, yeah, also on pit, and then this is in Mempawah. So Indonesia also working, not working only alone, but also working with the other like ASEAN, etc. And then also the other activities has been done, yeah, many activities here. And then finally conclusion, because as time. First, pit fire is serious. Fire is very difficult to fight and produce huge amount of greenhouse gas emission and another environmental destruction, including flora and fauna. And then, please do not play the game. Greenhouse gas emission reduction only could be reached if every sectors and human individual working together with clear target and the way to run without any exception as policy only, bureaucracy is not enough. 5% should be realized as should be applied, not just a jargon. And finally, this is my own suggestion. It is suggested not to use the old IPCC because we finally something wrong there. But then starting use a new greenhouse calculation based on the scientific data. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the very comprehensive and insightful presentation from Professor Bambang. I have noted several key points from Prof. Bambang's presentations, which are, the first is the tropical forest fire have a the tropical forests have a vital role in buffering the brunt of global environmental changes. However, extensive fires have become more frequent and pervasive in tropical forests worldwide. And Indonesia has been identified as a hotspot of fires activities, a considerable proportion of which has come from within its pit landscape. In addressing the problem of forest fire cannot be observed merely from a single pinpoint. It must be seen expansively in various aspects, including focusing on actors that are involved regardless of their impacts in the forest fire cases. Moreover, from a regional perspective in Southeast Asia, it is important to strengthen the existing ASEAN coordinating mechanism to engage all stakeholders, strengthen capacity, and also harmonize relevant programs and projects. Another important point to highlight in regards to the GHG emission reduction, it only could be reached if every sector and human individuals working together with a clear target. And also regarding the measurement of the GHG emission, it is suggested to start to use a new GHG calculation based on more scientific data rather than relying on the IPCC's old method. Thank you so much for the presentation, Professor Bambang Heru Suhadjo. Now we've come to the time for the third presentation. I'm very pleased to introduce you to the third keynote speaker, Dr. Helena Binti Muhammad Farki from the Department of International and Strategic Studies, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences of University Malaya. Dr. Helena have several book publications related to the topics such as the forest for the palms, essays on the topics of haze and environment in Southeast Asia, and also local and transboundary haze and the haze problem in Southeast Asia, palm oil and patronage. Dr. Helena will deliver her presentation, which is titled Haze in Southeast Asia, Regional Effects, Cooperation and Engagement. Again, should you have any question for Dr. Helena, please write it down on the link that has been provided by our committee on the chat box. Please write to whom your question is directed to, along with your brief identity. Dr. Helena, you have 20 minutes for your presentation. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. RDI will help to manage my slides for me. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for having me here, and it's very nice to see my sort of group members from the Humane group, and I'm very honored to be in the same panel as Pak Bambang as well as Ibu Lailan. I've had the privilege to meet them before, so I'm very happy to be here again to converse with them. So I will be talking a bit more on the regional perspective. Pak Bambang has given a great on-the-ground view, so I'll just sort of zoom out a bit and look at it from the regional perspective and also a bit more on the governance perspective. So in my title, if you notice, I've put here Southern Southeast Asia, because I think it's important for us to acknowledge that even though we always talk about transboundary haze as a Southeast Asian problem, we have to also realize that there's actually two sort of sub-problems in the region, and there's a very separate and different problem that is developing in the northern part of Southeast Asia, which is also resulting in haze, resulting in air pollution, PM 2.5, but the drivers and the sort of actors are very different over there. So for today, we are mainly going to discuss Southern Southeast Asia, which is our part of the world. But at the same time, we are also going to discuss about ASEAN and the attempts of them to manage haze. And for ASEAN level, they sort of manage it as a whole, not necessarily as a southern or a northern problem, but I'll go into that in a while. So so now I'm moving on to this slide, sort of discussing the causes and the effects. Something that I also want to mention here is that perhaps in Indonesia, the discussion is very much focused on the fires in Indonesia, but actually it is not only limited to Indonesia. As you can see, there are also fires mostly all over the region, and Malaysia, we have fires in Peninsula, we have fires in Sarawak, and we also have fires in Brunei. And even though let's say for Malaysia, the causes, the drivers are quite similar with Indonesia, mostly linked to agriculture, whether small scale or large scale. In Brunei, it's quite interesting because it's linked to more of infrastructure. So when they build roads through the peatlands, this has caused fires there as well. And I think this is important to mention because there's a lot of big development activities happening in the region that go through peatlands or near peatlands. So for example, in Malaysia, we have our Pan-Borneo Highway in Sarawak and Sabah, which cuts through a lot of peatlands. And also, I believe in Indonesia, the new development of the new capital is going to be in quite a peatland, close to peatlands as well. So we have to consider alternative drivers. So just a reminder as well to myself as well to not be too overly focused on the agriculture, but also we have to be conscious of these new and developing drivers as well. Roads, infrastructure, buildings as well that threaten the stability and resilience of our peatlands in our region. So as Emmanuel has mentioned, of course, fires can be anthropogenic, meaning that it's driven by human activity, caused by human activity, which I've mentioned a few examples already. But it's also, in a way, it's also natural in the sense that it can be triggered or driven by dry dry seasons, dry weather, and also the severity of haze in the region, the extent of haze in the region is very much linked to natural phenomena. So for example, El Nino. So if it's an El Nino year, El Nino comes in cycles. So if it's an El Nino year, the fires may be the same on the ground, but a serious El Nino year would mean that regionally, there will be a bigger regional problem. The haze will spread to a bigger area, and the haze will also last longer. Compared to a La Nina year where it's wet, the effects on the region will be reduced. So this is how the natural combines with the human to actually produce different aspects and different degrees of seriousness of the transboundary aspect of the haze. So I think I can move on to the next slide, please. So Pak Bambang has, and also Emmanuel has also mentioned this slightly, but I would like to just go a bit more detail. So if you look in the newspapers, if you look back over the years, haze was first mentioned as a transboundary problem in 1983. So that's like 4 decades already. And depending on the severity, it can affect up to 8 ASEAN states. And sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's less worse, but usually almost every year you would have some sort of haze in the region. And there have been some studies that have come about trying to evaluate how much damage actually this has caused. So there has been studies in terms of the financial losses, and there's also been studies in terms of health losses. So the 2015 haze, which was a very bad year, an especially bad year, a few studies have come out of that trying to evaluate how many people have died as a result of this haze. So we see some really scary numbers coming out. So there have been studies, one study said an estimated about 40,000 people have died as a result of the 2015 haze. And another one actually said an even bigger figure, which is 100,000. So we can see that's about the range here. And something interesting that we have to note is this does not match what the official figures say. The official figures generally have very low numbers of deaths, and that's because of the way that they count the deaths. So, for example, they would not only take into account people who died during the haze from haze-induced sicknesses like breathing difficulties and all that, but will also take into account people who were already sick and who got sicker because of the haze and then died, or people who would start to get sick during the haze but did not die during the haze but later on, and all of these other gray areas. So this has caused, this gives a more holistic idea that haze is not only affecting you during the haze season, but you can have all of these prolonged effects as well. So lost man hours, drops in tourism, firefighting costs, additional health costs, all these are the money, the losses, the financial losses that you have. And I think, as Emmanuel has mentioned also, when we have the emergencies, you have schools that close, not only in Indonesia, Malaysia as well. So my children couldn't go to school for a few days in Malaysia because of the haze. We have movement restrictions, very similar to what we have now in COVID-19. Basically, you cease to have a normal life. The worst affected always, we want to remind ourselves, even me, I'm in Malaysia, I'm currently in Singapore actually, even though we feel that, oh, it's terrible, but then we always have to remember that our friends in Indonesia are facing much, much more worse situations. We cannot imagine how bad it is right at the epicenter of the fires. And in terms of monetary losses as well, there was a calculation by World Bank that said about 2% of Indonesia's GDP was lost in 2015 because of the fires. Next, please. Pak Bambang has already touched on this, so I won't go into too much detail, but I find that it's very interesting, the kind of answers that were brought out in the Mentimeter, so that I see that there's still a bit of, not uncertainty, but I guess a bit of uncertainty about how this actually links to climate change. So I'm sure that Pak Bambang can explain much better than me, but I'm just going to try and explain it quite simply. Just calling to the attention that peatlands are a very precious resource that we in Southeast Asia have, especially Indonesia, Malaysia. We have huge amounts of peatlands, and peatlands are what we call carbon sinks. So there's a lot of peatlands, a lot of carbon that is stored in the ground, in the soil, underneath the water in the peatlands. And Pak Lamang has shown how this can vary across different types of peatlands and different areas. But essentially, peatlands are still recognized as a very important carbon sink. And this is good because carbon should not be in the atmosphere. It should be, kept where it is. So this is why carbon sinks are very important. But when you have fires, especially the land fires, land fires itself, like Pak Bambang mentioned, this is when the carbon that were originally stored in the soil is released into the atmosphere. So this is when you have a huge emissions of carbon and also all the other emission gases as well into the atmosphere. And this is what is the link to climate change. Previously, carbon that was stored safely away is released through fire. It is accelerated through fire, and this is why you have huge amounts of emissions, and this will make climate change worse. So there was a few years that during the big fires, we've had big spikes in national emissions in Indonesia, in Malaysia, to show that this is a big contributor. People always say that China and America, they emit a lot because of their link. Because of the industrial emissions, but actually we are having this problem where we have this very natural linked emissions as well. Next, please. So I would like to just call your attention to how this has affected regional relations across the region. So we always know this sort of age-old story where, when there is a regional haze, usually the countries that are affected the worst are Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. And there's always this sort of back and forth about, what should we do? Who should be responsible? How should we understand this problem? What are the governments doing? And these are just some of the quotes which I've collected over the years from the media, just to show what are the types of, the types of narrative that comes around, when different governments are trying to respond to the haze in their own way. So we see that because of the nature of the problem, which is cross-boundary, trans-boundary, there's always this conflict of interest. There's always this sort of blame game happening that countries would like to justify their view. They would like to defend their position. And it becomes especially confusing and especially difficult to manage when we look at the drivers. And one of the things that I must acknowledge as a Malaysian is that Malaysia has a very big role to play, not only in the fires in Malaysia, but also in the fires in Indonesia as well. So this has always been a bone of contention between Malaysia and Indonesia. The fact that we have a lot of Malaysian pulp and paper companies, palm oil companies in Indonesia. And oftentimes, they too have been linked to fires. So this has, of course, led to a lot of back and forth. It's your companies, it's not my companies, and all this kind of stuff. So this is sort of the underlying tensions linked to the drivers, which are very national based, which has been going on for many years. And this has been since the 1990s, basically. And we can see that there's a lot of anxiety when this comes around, because it threatens, this problem threatens the human security of all of these nations. And obviously the governments will respond accordingly in a way that they want to, number one, defend their position, and number two, try to do what they can to control it and to attempt to get other countries to be more serious about it as well. I did not name here which country said what. Maybe you guys can do a bit of a guessing game, which might be a bit interesting. So next, please. So a bit on the regional engagement. Next, ASEAN has been a very important player in regional engagement over haze. You can open up all of the boxes here. If you just go next, all of the result. Oh, go back. Oh, then something's wrong with the thing here. But anyway, this is just to show you that over time, ASEAN has been very involved. ASEAN has acknowledged that transboundary haze is an ASEAN issue and it should be handled at the ASEAN level. So these are all sort of the key agreements, key decisions that was taken. And I've stopped at 2003 because 2003 was one of the really important agreement on transboundary haze pollution, which Pak Bambang has mentioned as well. And this was a landmark agreement because it was supposed to be a legally binding agreement by ASEAN. And as we know that ASEAN normally does not do legally binding agreements. But this was the one agreement that really pulled all the ASEAN countries together and said, let's do something serious about the haze. Next, please. So this is the agreement that I talked about. So as I mentioned, it's a legally binding agreement, but unfortunately, ASEAN, I guess we could say it's a bit to do with, the ASEAN way of how ASEAN generally does things. We depend a lot on consensus, on non-interference, non-legalistic approach. And because of that, to get everyone's consensus, you will definitely end up with a document that's a bit weak and watered down, without any concrete commitments, no enforcement mechanisms or dispute settlement procedures. This has been discussed a lot in the literature, the sort of strengths and weaknesses of the agreement. And Indonesia ratified the agreement in 2014, which is about 10 years after the agreement was actually signed. And this was actually the year in which everybody got really excited because Indonesia was on board, and then everything in the agreement could now go forward in full force because now everybody was on board. And the agreement, even though I do say that it's weak and watered down, there was a lot of content to it that actually brought about a lot of mechanisms that try or that is trying to address haze in many levels. So, for example, the national monitoring centers, the agreement established each country to have a national monitoring center to monitor haze in their country. The SOP of what to do when there is haze was established for the whole region, so everybody would be on the same page when haze happens. An ASEAN Haze Fund to collect money to address haze. A panel of experts, and which Pak Bambang is also on the panel, which would be available for consultation. And then also an ASEAN Coordination Center for Transboundary Haze Pollution Control, an actual center that would be established to handle haze from a central location. So this was a very significant thing. The center is not yet established yet; it's still in the process. Currently, the interim functions are being carried out by the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta as well as ASMC. Okay, next. So these are also a bit of different perspectives from each country. So Indonesia is very much interested in trying to use all of its resources to handle the haze internally. They do sometimes receive help from the region. They've accepted help from Singapore, Malaysia, and also others from around the world as well. But sometimes they also do not, they turn down the regional assistance because they believe that they have things under control. So in Singapore, Singapore has attempted to unilaterally criminalize the haze. They have a Singapore Transboundary Haze Pollution Act, but it has not been very successful, not been very effective because nobody has managed to be prosecuted yet. And the main difficulty to this was to identify the culprits. So the haze, their act actually says that anyone or any entity that causes haze in Singapore will be liable under Singaporean law. But it's very, very difficult for Singapore to identify the exact location of where the smoke is coming from that is affecting Singapore. So that's the issue with Singapore. And Malaysia, we're kind of flip-flopping in between. So what this means is Malaysia at one time said that, oh, we also want a similar act like Singapore. But then after that, they sort of went back and said, no, actually, we're not interested in that because Singapore's act, they say, was not very successful, so we should look for another way. But there has been discussion in Malaysia to have a similar bill or a similar act, but the difference is just limited to Malaysian interests, meaning that we're not looking to prosecute just anyone, just only if Malaysian companies are found to be burning or are found to be involved in fire. So Malaysia is taking a very sort of taking care of our national entities first, making sure that Malaysian companies are behaving themselves. But like I said, this is not enforced yet. This is still in discussion stage. And at the moment, it's kind of quieted down. Next, please. So currently, ASEAN has a roadmap on ASEAN cooperation towards transboundary haze pollution control, and they call it the Haze-Free ASEAN by 2020. As you know, it was, 2019 was a bad haze, but not as bad as 2015. But actually before 2019, Indonesia was actually quite confident. They said that they had things under control. They managed it quite well, but unfortunately 2019, in addition with El Nino and all that, there was another haze. But as we know, 2020, we did not really have a regional haze. I think there was still some fires on the ground, but no regional haze because of COVID, and also because there was not a bad El Nino year. It was quite a wet year as well. So we're not sure actually how it will be next year and the year after, when hopefully when the economy comes back, hopefully it will be better at that time, but we're not sure. But it looks like we still do have certain problems that we need to sort out. Next, please. So some of the prevailing issues I would like to mention here, which are my last few slides. Next. So as Pak Bambang has pointed out, peatlands are a big issue. We have to seriously manage our peatlands properly. So this is actually a percentage for the whole region. So it's just pointing out that there's quite a lot of agricultural plantations around peatland, but as Pak Bambang has also pointed out, there are a lot of regulations actually preventing agricultural development, especially intensive agriculture like palm oil and pulp on certain depths and all that. But then somehow or other, a lot of these plantations are on peatland as well. And because of that, it's very hard to manage, water levels. Like Pak Bambang said, peatlands are supposed to be wet, not dry, but a lot of these plantations require a certain amount of dryness. So this is something that we have to look into. Next. And data standardization is another important issue as well. If you notice, there's actually no standard air pollution index across the countries. So the way that Indonesia counts will be different from the way that Singapore counts and Malaysia counts. So there have been some incidents where in Singapore, you would say that the PSI is X number, but in Johor, which is just across the causeway, would have a totally different number. So we don't actually have a regional overview of how bad the problem really is. There's also a problem of a meteorological capability variation. So for example, countries like Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, we are quite okay in our meteorological capabilities. That Thailand is okay as well, but the other Mekong countries, they are not so good. And because of that, it's hard to standardize, it's hard to know the exact problem. Okay, next please. And finally, we are still waiting on the establishment of the ACC. I think countries are all very working hard to hope that this can be established very soon. This is one of the elements of the agreement that has not yet been fully established yet. Interestingly, the ACC has been agreed to be in Jakarta. It's interesting to see the survey that was put earlier, which shows that a lot of people have not actually experienced haze. And I believe that might be because a lot of the audience today are from Java, which we don't see the fires. Originally, the ACC, which is the ASEAN Coordination Center for Haze, was supposed to be in Riau, but for certain reasons, it's agreed to be in Jakarta. So that's going to be an interesting thing. The problem now is that ASEC Environment Division, the ASEAN Secretariat Environment Division, is totally overburdened and they cannot give their full attention to haze. They have handling so many things other than that, including climate change. Okay, I think that's my final slide. Next, please. Yep, so I'm done. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Helena. Your presentation that really adds insight, especially in the ASEAN regional context. There are several key points that we can take from Dr. Helena's presentation, which is about the forest fire, which has given several effects, including social, economic, environmental, and also even political impacts. The impact had brought initiation in regional cooperation since the timeline of the 1992, and the engagement growth and progress until now, with some important moments, including the 2003, the agreement on the transboundary haze pollution. However, each of Asian member states keep maintaining their political interests and progressing toward different directions. Nevertheless, there are still prevailing issues such as the management of peatland use and the lack of consensus on data standardization across countries in Asia. Thank you so much, Dr. Helena, for your presentation. Now we will move to the discussion session. Right now we have two honorable discussants with us, welcoming Dr. Arif Wijaya from World Resource Institute, Indonesia, and Dr. Insinyur Lailan Syaufina, MSc, from Faculty of Forestry, Bogor Agricultural University, APB. First, we will listen to the feedbacks on the presented topics from our first discussant. Please welcome Dr. Arif Wijaya from WRI, Indonesia, that will give insight about the impact of forest fire to climate change more in depth. Dr. Arif Wijaya is Forest, Climate, and the Ocean Senior Manager from WRI, Indonesia. His work focuses on tropical forest landscape and their impacts on climate change, drivers of deforestation, and forest degradation, MRV, RADD+, and national GHG accounting. Dr. Arif, you have 15 minutes for your discussion session. Time is yours.
Thank you, Adrian, and good afternoon, everyone, honorable speakers. So I think we've just heard from three excellent speakers providing, information and insights about forest fire, transboundary haze, issues in Indonesia. As we know that our country actually, or Indonesia is actually a country that frequently experiencing the forest fires and peatlands issues. It happens back in the 80s when I guess pretty much of intact forest has been there. Was still there. So I think I would just try to take some important notes from the three speakers before I try to make my comments or some additions. I do agree that peatland and forest fires in Indonesia is actually a symptom of a weak land use governance. So this is actually the very, core issues from the forest and land fires that is actually happening more intensively over the past 2 decades or 3 decades. We see how the forest change trajectory from the western side of Indonesia, from Sumatra to Borneo, and then now actually goes to the eastern part of Indonesia, the Papua Island, that has still 1/3 of natural intact forests of Indonesia. Then if there is no strengthened policies, a better regulations, strong leadership, but also commitment, not only from the government, but also from non-state actors, including businesses, this forest will be gone soon in the near future, even before 2050. At the same time, whenever a drought season came, the El Nino and so forth, this will actually trigger more forest fires, especially on the pit, because it's very prone to fires once peatland is actually drained. And we really have to, pull all of our resources trying to tackle these issues. The first speaker, Dr. Immanuel Sakelves, has mentioned that what I like from the projects that he's actually leading, the human projects, how to involve the community-based, initiatives on trying to generate knowledge, but also to involve and participate more actively in mitigating the forest fires. This is actually a similar initiatives that also been there. Several private companies, they have this program called the Forest Fire programs, but also the National Peatland Restoration Agency that was established back in 2016. They also have this community involvement, community village to mitigate the forest fires. So I think really one of the speakers mentioned that forest fires and peatland fires in Indonesia is actually due to anthropogenic factors. And this is really true. Unlike in other countries like in Canada or like in the US, where actually fires also, triggered or mainly triggered because of the natural cause. In Indonesia is because of the conversions of peatlands, and then it triggers, to something else, to palm oil, to pulp and paper companies, or for rice plantation. It becomes very prone to fires, and it actually then trigger more fires, and it actually even, spread to the areas where the good forest, the intact forest still exists. Professor Bambang, and the second speakers actually mentioned about, how the severity of the forest fires in the last 2 decades, especially in the 2015, where the toxic haze actually goes to neighboring countries. I could again highlight here. Also, the third speakers already mentioned that in 2015, of about $16 billion of total economic loss actually, caused by the forest fires in Indonesia. This is based on the World Bank study, and on the top of that, another study mentioned that 100,000 of people actually facing a risk of premature death in the future because of the intensified forest fires, and 500,000 of people, not only in Indonesia, but also in Singapore, Malaysia, in Southeast Asian countries, they are seeking for medical assistance because of this severe forest fire back in 2015. And I think Professor Bambang mentioned also how the algorithm is actually is crucial to come up with the accurate estimates of forest fire emissions. Based on my scientific experience, in the first year, when we actually analyzed 20 years of the land cover change in Indonesia, the emissions from forestry and land use sectors could actually contribute to 50% of the forestry and land use emission in the bad year, when actually El Nino came, like 2015, like the year of 1984, or in 97 or 98, which was actually very prominent because of the forest fires and then the transitions in the government and so forth. Dr. Helena, the last speakers, made a very strong point, and also very important on the corporations in Southeast Asia. The ASEAN Transboundary Haze Agreement is actually key. Indonesia is indeed the last country in ASEAN that signed the agreement, because of, there are a lot of sticking points there, of course, for Indonesia that actually highly responsible for the transboundary haze in the region. So it took them, a long process to finally ratify this agreement. But again, I also would like to highlight that Indonesia has actually committed to reduce emissions by 2030 from 29% to 41% with international supports. Out of 29%, out of 50% of these emissions reductions target will come actually from forest and forestry and land use sectors. And if a forest fires keeps happening in the future, this will certainly compromise the government target to achieve their emissions reductions. That's one. What I would like to highlight a little bit coming up, all of the presentations, this excellent insight from the three speakers. Couple of points here. One, I think after the 2015 forest and peatland fires, the government established the National Peatland Restoration Agencies that was responsible to restore up to 2 million hectares of peatlands over 7 priority provinces in Indonesia. This has actually been an important milestone, whereby there is one, dedicated government agency that has responsibility to restore the forest fire. The second, the strengthened law enforcement. This is also very important. The government has been involving police, local police, army, and so forth to mitigate the fires. And the third is actually on the social forestry aspect, providing more authority to local community to manage their own land, improving their sense of ownership, the ownership to the land, actually improve the efforts to mitigate forest fires. And the last is the moratorium policies, primary forest and peatland moratorium policies, and also oil palm moratorium policy actually also lead to reduced forest fires. On the top of course, a friendly, weather. Last year there was, and also 2019 was actually relatively wet year. But I think these are some additional from my side on the top of what the speakers has conveyed before. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback, Dr. Arif. Indeed, it is a very interesting discussion. Dr. Arif previously mentions that there are some importances of providing the important resources in mitigating forest fires, including in engaging with the local communities and also engaging the local actors that also involved within the management of the forest fire. And also the presenters and the discussants agree that forest fires happen because of anthropogenic activities, that is hazards caused by human actions. Also, Dr. F previously mentioned that we need to focus on, including the importance on strengthening the law enforcement, and also regarding to the land ownership, there is importance of increasing the sense of the ownership on the land, and also regarding to the policy on the importance of the moratorium or on the certain aspect of the policy, including the forest fire policy. Thank you so much, Dr. Arif, for your very insightful and very interesting discussion. And the second, we will listen to the feedback from our second discussant. Please welcome Dr. Insinyur Lailan Syaufina, MSc. She is Associate Professor in the Department of Silviculture, Faculty of Forestry, Bogor Agricultural University, IPB, who has expertise in forest fire and forest protection. Dr. Insinyur Lailan previously published some papers related to the topic, such as a new estimate of particulate emissions from Indonesian peat fire in 2015, that published in 2019, and then forest and land fires are mainly associated with deforestation in Riau Province, Indonesia in 2020, and forest and land fires in Indonesia assessment and mitigation in 2018, among others. Dr. Insinyur Lailan Syaufina, you have 15 minutes for your discussion session, and time is yours.
Thank you, Pak Adrian. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the RDI for giving me the opportunity to be a discussant in this important webinar. It is an honor for me to be here with you all. I hope all the participants still have still excited to know more about fire and peatland. Yes, I think all the excellent speakers agree that there is a strong correlation between peatland and fire. It's just like sides of a coin, cannot be separated. This is interesting to be discussed. And from all the speakers also agree that the key for the fire prevention or to a solution for transboundary haze pollution is sustainable peatland management. That's I put title of my talk here about the sustainable peatland management as a solution for transboundary haze pollution from point of view of a case of Indonesia. Next, please. Yes, in this presentation, I would like to discuss about the fire and peatland, and also the changing of paradigm of Indonesian government in fire management, and also some technology and social approach have been conducted by Indonesian government, and sustainable peatland management. Next, please. Yes, as Dr. Helena said, that actually in our region, fire has been occurred since the last 4 decades, especially the large fires ever recorded in our region in the last 4 decades, starting from 1983, 1982, and 1983, and until 2019. And all these large fires are associated with El Nino phenomenon. So this El Nino phenomenon is very important factors influencing the fire occurrence in our region. Next, please. Yes, I don't want to elaborate more in this matters, because Prof. Bambang and also Dr. Emmanuel and also Dr. Helena have already described these impacts very clearly for us. The huge impacts of fire, especially the peatland fires. That 90% of the transboundary haze pollution produced by peatland fires. That's why the peatland management is very important to prevent the fires. Next, please. Yes, we also agreed that all speakers mentioned that the main cause of the fires is the human being, especially for peatland fires. 100% of the fires caused by human factors, especially the land clearing activities, using fire as the cheapest and the easiest way for people. Next, please. And this graph also showed us information from the global fire emission database that Indonesian fires in 2015 has contributed to almost 2 billion tons of greenhouse gas emission, as mentioned clearly and in detail by Prof. Bambang also. And also the other graph, the right graph, show us the peat fire combustion in Indonesia contributed to 45% of particulate matter emission. This is the research result from our collaboration, IPB and Leeds University, in calculating or estimating the emission from peatland fires. And the greater contributions is of 68% in 2015 fire, of course, affected human health. Next, please. Dr. Helena also has described how big function of the peatland area, and we all know that Indonesia has the largest peatland in the region. It is about 14.9 million hectares and about 8% of the total land area distribution. And these peatlands distributed in 3 big islands, Sumatra, Kalimantan, and Papua. And it ranks 4th of the largest peatland in the world after Canada, Russia, and USA, and as the largest tropical peatland we have in Indonesia, which have very important functions, including the hydrological balance, carbon stock, and sequestration, of course, biodiversity conservation, livelihood and ecotourism. Next, please. From this graph, we can see there is an interesting trend of forest and land fire occurrence in Indonesia since the last 5 years, from 2015 to 2020, that there is a decreasing trend of forest and land fires occurrences based on the data from Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Now the ministry also use satellite imagery process to estimate the burn area. And of course, in this graph also we can see the highest burn area occurred in 2015 and also in 2019, and it is related to the El Nino phenomenon. And it is the interesting trend, of course. And why is that so? So please, next slide. Yes. After having a large fire occurrence and devastated impacts in 2015, starting from 2016 until now, the government of Indonesia has shifted their paradigms into the new paradigm in addressing land and forest fires, which is more focused on fire prevention. Before 2015, the government policy is not so focused on fire prevention, but after the big large fire occurrence in 2015 has been shifted paradigm to be more focused on fire prevention. And we can see here the cycle of forest and land fire management in Indonesia. From January to December, they have already a strategy to prevent the fires. That's perhaps why there is a decreasing trend of forest and land fires occurrence within the last 5 years. Next, please. Yes, this is some technological, and later I will also explain about the social approach in forest fire management in Indonesia. Perhaps is also answer the question or the statement of Dr. Helena when she mentioned about the SMC, why the SMC is not functioning optimally to all the region. As I agree with you that all of the countries, all of the member states of ASEAN has their own capacity and technology being developed to control or to manage their forests and land fire. Such as in Indonesia, for early warning system, we have National Fire Danger Rating System called Spartan, managed by BMKG, the National Agency for Meteorology, Climatology, and Geophysics. It is very developed system, and this system developed based on Canadian Fire Danger Rating System. And previously, it was supported also by Canadian government. In this fire early warning system, include also peat moisture content in drought code formula, and also we have also water level monitoring system for peatland as an indicator for fire, as mentioned by Prof. Bambang, that one of the indicator for fire is the peat moisture content. It is the significant or important indicator for peatland fire. So here we have a system for monitoring water level managed by BRGM now, yeah, Peatland and Mangrove Restoration Agency. Next, please. And we have also a fire information system, or SIPONGI, managed by the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, where we can find the burn area data and also the hotspot as the indicator. The hotspot as indicator of forest and then fires also derived from LAPAN. LAPAN is the National Agency for Aeronautics and Space. Now we have only one data source of hotspot. Before we have many data source of hotspot. Now Indonesia has only one data hotspot from LAPAN. Next, please. And the Ministry of Environment and Forestry has also used fire monitoring using thermal CCTV and also drone for the early fire detection. So actually, within the last 2 decades, the government of Indonesia has developed some technologies to control the fire, like which I explained previously. Next, please. And the other technology for peatland monitoring is using IoT. This is the example of collaboration, regional collaboration in research among IPB, UPM, MIMOS from Malaysia, and also University Technology Brunei, and also BPPT from Indonesia. We have research on the peatland monitoring system using IoT. Next, please. And this is the agroforestry system. I think with this we can involve the community. Next, please. And this other social approach for supporting the community in zero burning land preparation, some technologies also have been developed. Next, please. Yes, I think all the speakers mentioned the importance of the multi-stakeholder partnership, the collaboration, because a result of a review of the APMS, ASEAN Peatland Management Strategy, implementation in Indonesia has identified some strength of Indonesia government in peatland management, including policies and peatland mapping, community involvement, and information system, incentive, restoration, and many others. And for future strategy, we need inventory of peatland hydrological unit, fire prevention, of course, partnership is very important, key for sustainable peatland management. And of course, regional collaboration and exchange of good practices is very important. I think all of the speakers also mentioned about this. Next, please. Yes, this is the multi-stakeholder partnership of forest and land fires, because fires or peatland itself cannot be managed by one single institution, but need to be approached by multi-stakeholders, including government, academician, private sectors, community, and also GSO or NGOs. Next, please. Yes, as the closing remarks, I can say that despite of the importance of peatland area in Indonesia, all the speakers also mentioned that peatland fires is one of the most serious issue on peatland management. And for Indonesia case, the government has changed paradigm in forest and land fire control by focusing on fire prevention. And there are some technology and also social approach have been developed in controlling the fire. And of course, the last one is the multi-stakeholder approach is the key for sustainable peatland management in our region. With this, I would like to end my comments for all the speakers. Thank you for the excellent presentation and sharing with us. Thank you. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dr. Lailan for a very interesting and insightful presentation, especially for bringing first the historical aspects of Indonesian forest fires that is also linked to the previous presentation by Dr. Helena, and also Dr. Lailan mentions on the importance of bringing the importance of peatland management as part of forest fire prevention, through the fact that peatland fire contributes much to the GHG emission based on the time series data with the pivotal moments in 2015. And also, moreover, we also need to consider that Indonesia has the largest tropical peatland area in the world. Another important point from Dr. Lailan, she mentions that technological, agricultural, and social approaches are important in the management of peatland. For the technological approaches, Dr. Lailan mentioned about the optimization of early warning system for forest fire and also water monitoring system, fire information, and also early detection system. Meanwhile, for agricultural approach, including a more sustainable way of agriculture, and social approach, including the involvement of communities. And there is also a very important point that the multi-stakeholder approaches are also important to gather all of the actors from the research institutes or universities, and also from the private sector and from the community, and also from the government together to build the sustainable peatland management system. Thank you so much, Dr. Lailan, for your very insightful presentation. What a great discussion we had here between our keynote speakers and discussants. I'm sure that all the key points from the discussion are very insightful for all of us today and increase our understanding about forest fires and its management, especially in Indonesia. Okay, now that we have heard the feedback from our honorable discussants, it is the time for question from the participants of this webinar. We have collected all of the questions, but due to the limitation, we will only read some of the questions from the list of questions. So first, we have a question for Dr. Emmanuel. The question is from Afif from University of Indonesia. His question is, it is such a nice idea about community perception on the haze pollution due to the forest fire. Which community should we involve in the transboundary haze pollution management? Since the affected community is large and widely varies across areas with different backgrounds. I hope the question is clear, Dr. Emmanuel. You may try to answer the question.
Thanks. Yes, it's very clear and it's a very good question. Like you realize that we're running out of time, so I'm going to give a very short answer. But should Afif wants more information, I'm happy to have a further discussion post the event. I think the important thing is to note that with co-design, you have a different mindset. Rather than having things happening or dictated to communities, actually you involve them to be part of. I agree that actually global challenges, they start first locally, and every area will be very different. So, there isn't one size approach to that. It will differ depending on the area and the context where you're working. But I would be personally starting with, first of all, forest-dependent communities. So the ones that have the most to make, the most to lose. And, they live very close to the forest or in the forest. They're the ones that are engaging or they have things happening to them. And then I would gradually be expanding that to include all the other communities, because the main thing is to make this as inclusive as possible, rather than seeing, that the focus is only on a single community or a single actor So the approach will vary, depending on the area. And that's why I mentioned that we need, first of all, to understand the intersectoral challenges to be able to address this. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel, for the answer. Maybe we can move to the next question. We have another question for Professor Dr. Bambang Herosarjo. The question is from Jason from NUS, Singapore. The question is, thank you for the presentation, Prof. Bambang. As you explain about how pit fires are a serious problem right now, what is the best alternative to manage pit fire prevention? Should we, the community, be more adapted with the frequent pit fire? I hope the question is clear, Bambang.
Okay, I try to answer the questions. Yeah, I think one of the best solution is the sustainable pit management. There is regulation there, and like I said before, you would like to manage your pit, and you will produce more and more, and then there will no more, negative impact. Then the problem is you should support and give a big, challenge to the people and also to the local governments, even to the central government, on how you manage your pit there, because the solution is there. Even though you have excellent everything, even you have the excellent monitoring, for instance, like we have experience now in several places, you have already detected the pit fires there. So the problem is, who will fight? Who will solve the problems? Because sometimes, when the fire there and smoke already, the people don't want to involve them there. So again and again, you should work together. For instance, like you have found something, then you tell them, or you and your group, like NGO, everybody, because I close also with them. Yeah, work together to fight this. They keep your pit look like it original, like it's ecosystem, like because again and again, pit is the wetland, should wet, or at least the surface is quite wet, and protect it from the fires. Because sometimes sometimes the people don't want, because they said that, oh, this is not my job, this is government job. So when the problem occurs, hey guys, you will affect it. You will tell that it's your problems now. So this is the reason why I said before in my conclusion, you cannot blame the government. The government already tried, especially in Indonesia. We have 7,000 islands, and we have also 14 million people, and also with different characteristics of the people on the ground. The part of the people really care, and the people don't care. So this is the situation, see, and then again and again, strengthen the collaboration is one of the solution, and keep your pit is wet. I think that is the solution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bambang, for the answer. And maybe we can go next to the next question. We have two questions actually for Dr. Helena, and actually this question is the two questions is connected to each other. The first question is from Dila from Unpar, Bandung. The question is, how should we deal with or mitigate ASEAN's intergovernmental principle, or the ASEAN way, and unilateralism, because it might prevent stronger regional coordination or cooperation in managing transboundary haze pollution. And the second question is from Iksan from RDI, Bandung, which is considering that the ASEAN way may not solve the issue of contradicting interests between ASEAN member states. In your perspective, how can the ASEAN Secretariat bolster the commitment of all ASEAN member states to tackle these issues. Are the current resources available? Key to this. For example, by allocating more resources into capacity building, technological sharing, or awareness raising for each ASEAN member states. These are the questions for Dr. Helena, and you may try to answer, Dr. Helena.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, definitely this ASEAN Way has been quite a big problem in managing haze, because it kind of leaves the decision making not at the ASEAN level but at the region, at the country level. So it really very much depends on how much the country is interested to respond. So I think one of the things that is an opportunity now is the interest for the individual countries in terms of climate change. There's a lot of initiative from Malaysia, from Indonesia, positive things like Pak Arif has talked about, commitments from these countries. So I think linking haze to climate change is a very big opportunity, because not many people, as we have seen in our Mentimeter, actually realize the link between haze and climate change. So I think once this becomes more obvious, and this can be the incentive for the countries as well as the ASEAN level to act on haze, or rather to prevent haze, as an opportunity for us to also contribute at the global level to this global problem. And I think this can also possibly attract international funding as well. We know that there is limited funding available in the region. So when we shape it, or when we propose it as a region, as a global climate change problem, as compared to a regional localized problem, it may open up new sources of funding. So I think this is an opportunity that we can take. So I think I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Helena, for your very nice answer. And thank you to all of the presenters and discussants for giving such a very interesting discussion, also presentation, and also clear and comprehensive answer to the questions from our participants. And maybe for the next, we are heading to the closing session for today's webinar. And we have heard the comprehensive and insightful presentation from our honorable keynote speakers, from Dr. Emmanuel, from Professor Dr. Bambang Heru Saharjo, and from Dr. Helena Binti Muhammad Farki. And we have also heard a very nice discussion session with our honorable discussant, Dr. Arif Wijaya, and also Dr. Insinyur Lailan Syofina, MSc. And from our today's webinar, we can learn a lot of things from the importance of the peatland management in forest fire prevention, and also the importance of engaging with the community, local community, but also considering the local actors that are also involved, regardless their contribution to the impact of the forest fires. And also there is also the importance of focusing also on the technological aspects, social aspects, and also agricultural aspects, because these aspects are also very interrelated to the peatland management in Indonesia. And maybe for today's webinar, we can conclude our webinar now. And I would like to express our highest gratitude to first to Dr. Emmanuel Cekleves, and also second to Professor Dr. Bambang Heru Saharjo, and to Dr. Helena Binti Muhammad Farki, and also to Dr. Arif Wijaya and Dr. Insinyur Lailan Syofina for willing to join us today in this webinar and share such insightful knowledge to all of us on the topic of forest fire management. I hope all the key takeaways from every presentation and discussion can inspire us and are useful in understanding better about forest fire and its management. And I also want to give appreciation to all of the invitees. First, from delegates from the Global Environment Center, or GEC, and second to Center for International Forestry Research, C4, and to Ministry of Agrarian Affairs and Spatial Planning, ATR BPN, and Meteorological, Climatological and Geophysical Agency, BMKG. And participants of, and lastly, from Ministry of Environmental and Forestry, KLHK. And participants of this webinar, thank you for your enthusiasm in joining us today. Also for all of the questions that you have given. Lastly, we can take a picture for documentation. So everyone, please kindly open your cameras so we can take the picture together. Maybe team from RDI can give direction for the taking photo.
Okay, Kasongko, I will give a direction. So please, for everyone here, open your camera. Okay. All right. Okay. Actually, there will be 2 slides, so maybe just be ready, and I will take this screenshot. Okay. The first one. That's 1, 2, 3. Okay, nice. One more. Okay. One more. Wait. Okay. 1, 2, 3. All right. All right, guys. It's done. Thank you, Kasongko.
Thank you, Maria, for a very nice direction. And also, thank you so much once again to everyone, and see you on the next occasion. And this webinar will also be posted in RDI's YouTube channel later. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you
Goodbye.
so much, everyone.
Presentation.
Thank you for the
Okay.
speakers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Arif.
Bye.
Thank you, Bu Lailan.
Thank you, Indah. Songko.
Ya, terima kasih Ibu.
Bentar. Oh, ada paket.
Oke, kayaknya udah semua, Kak Songko. Indah.
Iya.
Thank you,
Perlu-
Kak Songko. Yeay.
Makasih semuanya, makasih all, makasih adik-adik semuanya, makasih.
Agak cringe gitu.
Sorry ya tadi kalau ada salah kata atau apa. Thank you, thank you.
Oh,
Thank you
bagus
Indah ya buat
banget.
fasilitasinya, keren banget.
Ini foto Fiska, ya, intern ya?
Gimana, gimana?
Ini foto Fiska intern ya? Oh bukan, oh udah lah.
Oh,
Astaga.
Tadi masih ada. Masih ada.
terus gue mau adik-adik lagi, astaga.